Hi, I'm Tyler, and today we're going to be doing a Western Blot. A Western Blot is a protocol by which we can separate proteins using a polyacrylamide gel by electrophoresis, and then transferring it onto a nitrocellulose membrane and using antibodies to target and image specific proteins. So what I've got today is the gel that's already been pre-made. I've got the electrophoresis tank, the clamping frames that I'm going to be using. I've got a buffer dam since I'm only going to be using one. I've got my protein samples here in blue and a protein ladder to compare it against proteins of known molecular weight. And I've got my running buffer, and I've got a bucket of ice. The ice is not really required. It's not called for in the protocol, but I find it helpful. So first thing you want to do is get the gel out of the fridge and dry it off. It should be in a Ziploc bag wrapped in a damp paper towel. It will still have the comb in it that's used to separate the different wells. Sometimes it can be difficult to see the wells once you take the comb out. So if you want to, you can use a Sharpie and mark where the wells are. Make sure you do it on the longer of the glass plates. There's a shorter glass plate in the front and a longer one that goes all the way up in the back. Make sure you mark on the side that has the longer plate on it. So you can just mark where the wells are if you'd like to. And if you want to, you could also write what's going in each well so that you don't get confused. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 samples that are going in, including my protein ladder. So I've just marked 6 wells right there. Now you want to pull the comb out gently and evenly so it leaves the wells in their shape. Then I'm going to be putting it into my clamping frame with the buffer dam since I'm only going to be doing one. If I were doing 2 at the same time, I could put 2 gels on, one on either side of the frame, like this. But since I'm only going to be using one, I need to use the buffer dam. Just slide them in here at the bottom at an angle, and then push them together and clamp it shut. You can do a Western Blot on up to 4 gels at a time. If you're doing more than 2, you need to get one of these clamping frames that do not have the banana plugs on top. That is so they can fit inside the electrophoresis tank like this with the banana plugs in the back. The red always goes with the red side and the black always goes with the black side. But this lid, it always needs to be able to fit on the banana plugs, and if you have 4 banana plugs, it's not going to be able to fit on top. So use this companion module if you're going to be doing 4 at a time, or more than 2. Next thing I will be doing is filling the clamping frame, which has the buffer dam and my gel in, with the 1x running buffer. You should still be able to see the Sharpie marks that you left down there. Then I will be pipetting my samples into each of these wells. I'll start with my protein ladder on the far left side and put each of my samples into the wells. So for my samples, I'm going to be using 10 microliters of each of my samples and 3 microliters of the protein ladder. So I'll start with this micropipetter, which is 2 to 20 microliters, and grab the medium pipette tips. Sometimes it helps to get down on eye level to make sure that you can see the actual gel and the wells that you're pipetting into. Also, be very careful that you don't dispense it too quickly, or else it may not land in the well properly. So do it nice, slowly, and steady. Carefully insert the pipette tip in between the short and the long glass plate into the area of the well that you marked. The tip of the pipette should barely be able to fit inside before you dispense the protein. Fill the rest of your tank with the running buffer. You need to at least make sure that the water rises above the bottom green wire, the bottom of the frame, or you can follow this and make sure it gets up to the 2 gels mark. It doesn't need to be quite at that level.
Even if you have 1 gel?
Yeah. Then you put the lid of the electrophoresis machine on top of the tank, lined up so that the red wire goes to the red banana plug and the black wire goes to the black banana plug. Set it in ice to keep the gels from burning. The electric current will cause the gel to heat up, so I keep it in ice in order to prevent it from melting. This isn't required, I just find it helpful. Next, turn on the machine, the power switch is in the back, and set the machine around 180. You can run yours higher and it will go faster, or if you're worried about it burning, you can lower the voltage. I find 180 works pretty well for me. And then once it's set up and everything, hit the run button. And let that go for about 45 minutes to an hour. If you're wondering when to know if it's done, you can look at your indicator dies and the protein ladder, and when this comes all the way down to the bottom near the green wire, that's when you know that the proteins have been separated out well enough for you to be able to see them. To remove the gel, you pick it up out of the tank and open the clamp so that the buffer can drain. You can remove the buffer dam, that's not important anymore. And then just dry your plate with the gel in it. So I'm going to use one of these divided Tupperware containers, and I'm going to pour some of the transfer buffer that we made earlier into the smaller compartment on this side. And I'm going to remove my gel into that compartment, and using a green wedge, which I'll just dip into the transfer buffer, I'm going to put the wedge in between the short and the long glass plate and just push them apart from each other until one of the plates lets go of the gel. At this point, I'm wanting to spend careful attention to which direction the proteins are aligned in. I can cut off the excess using the sharp end of the wedge at about right here. I can take off the excess at the bottom, off the side, and take off the loading gel at the top. On my final product, I'm going to want the ladder on the left side and to look across this way, but I'm looking at it backwards right now. That just depends on which glass plate held onto it. But to keep myself oriented in the future, I'm going to cut a notch into the top left-hand corner of this, which is actually going to end up being the top right-hand corner. This notch will just let me know which direction the gel is facing. Then I'm just going to put the gel inside of this section of the Tupperware, using my transfer buffer to loosen it off the plate until it just slips off. I'll just let the gel sit inside this section for about 20 minutes for it to equilibrate. I start by putting some transfer buffer into the larger compartment and using the green wedge from earlier, getting as many air bubbles out of the pad as I possibly can. Next, using the wedge, I'll carefully lift up the gel from the smaller compartment and place it onto the filter paper, followed by another piece of filter paper. Next, I'll finish it up with one last foam pad. I will clamp it using this frame and then place it in here into our tank again. So I'll place it underneath and then close it quickly and lock it into place. Then I'll place it into this frame so that the black plastic is facing the black plastic into my electrophoresis and transfer tank so that it stirs the transfer buffer during my transfer, and run it for 1 hour.